Emergency call from Outpost 4. The USS Enterprise is moving to investigate and assist.
Outpost 4 reported under attack, sir.
Before the USS Enterprise became one of the most recognizable starships in television history, the actors who brought its crew to life were facing struggles that few fans ever imagined. On screen, they explored distant galaxies, battled alien civilizations, and represented humanity's brightest future. Off-screen, however, their lives were often filled with personal sacrifices, career setbacks, heartbreaking losses, and moments of incredible courage that shaped not only their own destinies but the legacy of Star Trek itself. For decades, audiences have admired these performers for their unforgettable characters. Captain Kirk inspired generations to lead with confidence. Spock taught the value of logic and compassion. Dr. McCoy reminded us that humanity should always come first. Yet behind every iconic performance was a real person fighting battles that had nothing to do with science fiction. Some overcame financial hardship before becoming stars. Others struggled with being forever associated with a single role. A few used their fame to change society in ways far greater than anything seen on television. The remarkable journey of the original Star Trek cast proves that real life can sometimes be even more extraordinary than fiction. William Shatner's rise to fame is one of Hollywood's greatest comeback stories. Today, it is almost impossible to imagine anyone else playing Captain James T. Kirk, but long before he became the face of one of television's most beloved franchises, Shatner's acting career was hanging by a thread. Born in Montreal, Canada, Shatner developed an interest in acting while attending McGill University. After graduation, he built his reputation performing Shakespeare and classical theater with the Stratford Festival. His talent was undeniable, but success in Hollywood proved far more difficult than anyone expected. Throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s, Shatner accepted almost any acting job he could find. He appeared in westerns, dramas, anthology series, and low-budget films, yet steady work remained frustratingly out of reach. There were periods when money became so scarce that he reportedly lived out of the back of his truck while searching for his next opportunity. Everything changed in 1966. When Gene Roddenberry cast him as Captain James T. Kirk, few people realized they were witnessing television history in the making. Although Star Trek struggled in the ratings during its original run, Shatner's confident performance instantly made Kirk one of television's most memorable leaders. Unlike traditional military commanders portrayed on television, Kirk combined intelligence with instinct. He was decisive without being reckless, compassionate without appearing weak, and willing to trust both logic and emotion when making impossible decisions. That balance became one of the defining strengths of the series. Ironically, while Star Trek was cancelled after only 3 seasons, the show's popularity exploded in syndication. Millions of new viewers discovered the adventures of the Enterprise, transforming Kirk into an international cultural icon. Instead of fading into obscurity, Shatner embraced his newfound fame. He returned as Captain Kirk in 7 feature films, allowing audiences to watch the character grow older while maintaining the same adventurous spirit that made him famous. Outside of Star Trek, Shatner refused to let himself become trapped by a single role. He found success in television once again with T.J. Hooker before reinventing himself decades later as the witty attorney Denny Crane in The Practice and Boston Legal. His performance earned multiple Emmy Awards and introduced him to an entirely new generation of viewers. Shatner also explored music, writing, directing, and even space exploration itself. In 2021, at the age of 90, he became the oldest person ever to travel into space aboard Blue Origin's suborbital flight. For millions of fans, the moment carried extraordinary symbolism. The man who had inspired generations to dream about space exploration had finally experienced it himself. Yet Captain Kirk would never have become such an enduring character without his closest companion, the calm, logical officer whose raised eyebrow became one of television's most recognizable expressions. Leonard Nimoy's journey was every bit as remarkable. Born in Boston to Ukrainian Jewish immigrant parents, Nimoy understood hard work from an early age. His family struggled financially, and acting was hardly considered a practical career choice. Nevertheless, he remained determined to pursue his dream. Like many young actors, Nimoy accepted countless small roles throughout the 1950s. He appeared in westerns, science fiction movies, crime dramas, and low-budget productions, slowly building experience while searching for the breakthrough that always seemed just beyond reach. That breakthrough finally arrived when he was cast as Mr. Spock. Initially, no one could have predicted that the half-human, half-Vulcan science officer would become one of the most beloved characters in television history. Spock represented something audiences had rarely seen before. Rather than relying on emotional speeches or dramatic heroics, he solved problems through intelligence, discipline, and careful reasoning. His constant struggle between logic and emotion reflected conflicts many viewers recognized within themselves. The chemistry between Kirk, Spock, and Dr. McCoy became the emotional foundation of Star Trek. Each represented a different aspect of human decision-making. Kirk trusted instinct. Spock relied on logic. McCoy followed compassion. Together, they formed one of television's greatest character dynamics. Ironically, Spock's enormous popularity created unexpected difficulties for Leonard Nimoy himself. Fans increasingly viewed him not as an actor but as Spock. Interviews focused almost entirely on the character, and many producers struggled to imagine him playing anyone else. Feeling trapped by his own success, Nimoy published a memoir titled I Am Not Spock. Many fans misunderstood the title, believing he had rejected the character completely. In reality, the book explored the complicated relationship between an actor and the fictional figure who had come to define his public identity. Years later, after reflecting on his extraordinary career, Nimoy published another memoir called I Am Spock. This time, the message was very different. Rather than distancing himself from the role, he embraced the idea that Spock had become part of his life forever. The qualities that made the Vulcan so admired, wisdom, curiosity, integrity, and emotional restraint, were values Nimoy genuinely respected. His contributions extended far beyond acting. He directed 2 successful Star Trek films, helping shape the franchise's future during one of its most important periods. He also became a respected photographer, poet, musician, and author, proving that his creativity reached well beyond science fiction. In later years, Nimoy openly discussed his battle with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a condition caused largely by decades of smoking. Rather than hiding his illness, he encouraged others to quit smoking before facing similar health consequences. When Leonard Nimoy passed away in 2015, tributes poured in from around the world. Fans remembered not only the actor who played Spock but also the thoughtful, generous individual whose influence extended far beyond television. His famous farewell, "Live long and prosper," had evolved into something greater than a fictional greeting. It had become a universal message of hope. But while Kirk and Spock often dominated the spotlight, another member of the Enterprise quietly became the emotional heart of the crew. Dr. Leonard "Bones" McCoy, portrayed by DeForest Kelley, brought warmth, humor, and compassion to every mission, reminding audiences that even in humanity's most advanced future, kindness would always remain one of its greatest strengths. DeForest Kelley may not have received as much attention as some of his fellow cast members, but his portrayal of Dr. Leonard "Bones" McCoy became one of the defining elements of Star Trek. His sharp wit, unwavering compassion, and constant disagreements with Spock created some of the series' most memorable moments. Yet before he became the Enterprise's chief medical officer, Kelley had followed a very different path. Growing up in Georgia, he dreamed of becoming a physician. Financial limitations, however, made medical school impossible, forcing him to reconsider his future. Acting eventually became the unexpected career that changed his life. During the 1940s and 1950s, Kelley built a respectable resume, often appearing in westerns where he was cast as the villain rather than the hero. Although the work was steady, he longed for a role that reflected his true personality. Friends described Kelley as gentle, thoughtful, and remarkably kind, of qualities rarely associated with the cold-hearted outlaws he portrayed on screen. Everything changed when he joined Star Trek in 1966. As Dr. McCoy, Kelley finally found a character that allowed his warmth and humanity to shine. McCoy was brilliant without arrogance, emotional without weakness, and fearless when defending his patients. His debates with Spock became legendary, representing the timeless conflict between emotion and logic. While Kirk often stood between them, audiences quickly realized that neither perspective was complete without the other. McCoy's compassion reminded viewers that science alone could never solve every problem. Sometimes the most important decisions required empathy, forgiveness, and understanding. Following the original series, Kelley returned for each of the Star Trek feature films, becoming a familiar and comforting presence for longtime fans. Unlike many actors who actively pursued new leading roles, Kelley remained deeply connected to the franchise that had transformed his career. He frequently attended fan conventions, spending hours speaking with admirers and signing autographs. Those who met him often described him as one of the kindest members of the cast, treating every fan with genuine appreciation. When DeForest Kelley passed away in 1999, tributes emphasized not only his unforgettable performance but also the humility that defined his personal life. His portrayal of Dr. McCoy continues to remind audiences that intelligence means little without compassion. While Kelley embodied kindness on screen, another member of the Enterprise had already demonstrated extraordinary courage long before cameras ever started rolling. James Doohan's real-life story sounds more like the script of a war film than the biography of an actor. Born in Vancouver, Canada, Doohan served in the Canadian Army during the Second World War. On D-Day, he landed on Juno Beach as Allied forces fought to liberate Europe from Nazi occupation. During the intense fighting, he was struck by multiple bullets, losing one finger and suffering serious injuries that nearly ended his life. Most people would have considered those experiences more than enough for one lifetime. Instead, Doohan eventually turned to acting. When he was cast as Montgomery Scotty Scott, the Enterprise's miracle-working chief engineer, he brought an authenticity that audiences instinctively trusted. Scotty wasn't simply repairing engines, he represented resilience under pressure. One of Doohan's most famous creative decisions was giving Scotty a Scottish accent. Although he wasn't Scottish himself, he believed the accent conveyed strength, reliability, and engineering excellence. It became one of the character's defining traits and helped transform Scotty into a fan favorite. Despite losing a finger during the war, Doohan carefully concealed the injury throughout most episodes. Many viewers watched the series for decades without ever noticing. His influence extended far beyond entertainment. Over the years, countless engineers, astronauts, and scientists credited Scotty as an inspiration for pursuing careers in technology and space exploration. Doohan often expressed deep gratitude for hearing those stories, believing they represented the greatest achievement of his career. Perhaps the most touching example of his kindness involved a struggling fan who reached out during an incredibly difficult period of her life. Rather than sending a brief reply, Doohan invited her to meet him at a convention. Their conversation marked the beginning of years of encouragement that ultimately helped her rebuild her future. When asked later about his proudest accomplishment, Doohan didn't mention movies or television awards. He spoke about helping another human being find hope. That simple answer revealed everything people needed to know about the man behind Scotty. As Star Trek expanded its influence around the world, another cast member quietly became one of television's most important symbols of diversity and inclusion. George Takei's role as Lieutenant Hikaru Sulu broke barriers that extended far beyond science fiction. During the 1960s, Asian American actors were rarely offered complex, respected characters on network television. Stereotypes dominated Hollywood, leaving little room for authentic representation. Sulu changed that. Rather than being defined by his ethnicity, Sulu was portrayed as an accomplished Starfleet officer whose intelligence, professionalism, and courage made him an essential member of the Enterprise crew. For countless viewers, that image carried tremendous significance. Yet Takei's own childhood had been shaped by one of the darkest chapters in American history. During World War II, his family was forcibly relocated to Japanese-American internment camps after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Although he was only a child, those experiences left lasting emotional scars that influenced his worldview for the rest of his life. Instead of allowing bitterness to define him, Takei dedicated himself to education and civil rights. Through books, speeches, documentaries, and public appearances, he shared his family's story so future generations would better understand the consequences of prejudice and discrimination. In 2005, Takei publicly came out as gay, becoming one of Hollywood's most recognizable advocates for LGBTQ equality. At a time when many public figures still feared discussing their personal lives, his honesty inspired countless people around the world. His social media presence introduced him to millions of younger followers who may never have watched the original Star Trek, yet quickly came to admire his humor, optimism, and commitment to justice. Looking back, it becomes clear that George Takei's legacy extends far beyond Lieutenant Sulu. He helped demonstrate that representation matters not simply because audiences deserve to see themselves on screen, but because those portrayals have the power to change how society views entire communities. As Star Trek continued evolving, another actor quietly contributed not only as a performer but also as a writer, proving that some of the franchise's most valuable voices worked behind the scenes as well.